Chapter 341, Earth Escape? Accompanied by the sound of laughter, a young boy ran out from behind the door of the house. He seemed to be about 10 years old. At this moment, the boy was wearing an exquisite leather jacket. While shouting the names of 2 cats and raccoons, he rushed towards a mischievous child playing in the snow. "Stop causing trouble, you 2 little rascals. Grandpa will get angry again soon," the boy warned. Despite his words, he immediately bent down, scooped up some snow, and formed a snowball. He then hurled it at the 2 cats and raccoons not far away. The 2 animals were incredibly agile. They dodged the flying snowball effortlessly and continued to ignore the boy, running towards the courtyard in the middle of the valley while still play fighting. Feeling underestimated, the boy pouted angrily and chased after them through the thick snow. When he finally caught up to the cats, he tried to grab one of the disobedient creatures. However, the cat deftly dodged his hand, slipping through his legs with a swift movement. This maneuver caught the boy off guard. His eyes and hands followed the cat, but his body lost balance, causing him to fall forward into the snow with a thud. "Heh-heh," the boy laughed at his own clumsiness. He wasn't angry, but rather amused by the situation. He staggered to his feet, brushed the snow off his clothes, and resumed his attempt to catch the cats. "Rove, Rove, where did you go?" A slightly old voice called from the door of the house. Looking up, Rove saw a white-haired, hale, and hearty old man standing at the door with another cat in his arms. "Grandpa, Hwobi and Millie are being so naughty. Hwobi snatched Millie's dried fish, and now they're chasing each other into the yard," Rove explained, shaking the snow from his hair and placing his hands on his hips in exasperation. "Really?" The old man chuckled at his grandson's words. "Then why are you trying to catch them yourself? Look at your new clothes, all dirty now. Your grandma will definitely scold us when she sees this. Tina has been in a bad mood lately. Come back inside and see Grandpa." "Oh," Rove replied nervously at the mention of his grandma. He slowly walked back towards the house through the snow. The old man pulled out his wand and gave it a light shake. The tip of the wand transformed into a cat teaser with feathers and bells. The cat in his arms immediately perked up at the sight of the toy. "Don't worry, Mole. This is for Hwobi and Millie," the old man chuckled, shaking the cat teaser in his hand. The jingling bells quickly attracted the attention of the 2 cats chasing each other in the distance. Unable to resist the temptation, they rushed towards the house. "Grandpa, you always have a solution," Rove said admiringly as he watched the 2 little troublemakers become so obedient. No matter what magical animal it is, each has its own characteristics and personality. If you learn to understand them, you'll find that their wildness has its own charm, the old man said, squinting his eyes and looking at his grandson with pride. The old man enjoyed the harmonious atmosphere and took in the snowy scene in the valley with a sense of comfort. However, his expression gradually became serious as he looked in the direction of Anduin. "Is it possible that he has found me?" Anduin was completely invisible now, hidden under his cloak. Anduin's body could isolate him from magical fluctuations. Even if someone saw through his invisibility, the thick birch tree he was hiding behind was enough to completely cover his figure. However, Anduin was aware that the old man had glanced in his direction, possibly sensing something unusual. "Don't mess around outside. You'll catch a cold and get punished later," the old man calmly advised his grandson. He then quickly waved his wand, using a levitation spell to lift his grandson, Rove, and bring him closer with a hint of urgency. Suddenly, a dramatic change occurred. The old man and Rove were less than 30 meters apart when the ground between them erupted. A whiz, Ard wearing a white faceless mask sprang from the earth and rushed towards the floating Rove. The masked wizard extended his right hand, casting a spell at the old man, while his left hand grabbed Rove. Holding Rove hostage, he swiftly retreated, increasing the distance between himself and the old man. "Ah!" Rove cried out in shock as the masked man appeared before him. In an instant, he found himself tightly clamped under the stranger's armpit. Simultaneously, 3 other faceless wizards emerged from the ground around the house. They quickly formed a semicircle, confronting the old man. The sudden turn of events surprised both the old man and Anduin. Neither had expected anyone to be hiding beneath their feet. Anduin, after his initial shock, realized why he hadn't been able to locate these individuals earlier. They had used a special magic to burrow underground. Their concealment methods were indeed impressive. Anduin had observed for so long without detecting any magical fluctuations. The old man, standing at the door, was equally shocked. He had sensed something was amiss, but hadn't anticipated this. Now, with his grandson kidnapped, anxiety etched across his face. Boom! The old man reacted swiftly, deflecting the spell aimed at him. He squinted at the masked figures, noting their faceless masks and snow-white wands, and felt a sinking feeling in his chest. "Help, Grandpa! Who are you? What are you doing?" Rove cried out in panic, his small eyes wide with fear. The masked man holding Rove heard the boy's plea and deftly waved his wand. Rove's mouth was magically sealed shut, silencing him instantly. End of this chapter. Chapter 342, Newt Scamander. Silver Spears? Why are you in England? I remember after the Saints' party collapsed, you hid in Germany. Why are you now involved in poaching and smuggling? Despite his precious grandson being held hostage, the old man remained calm, his expression shifting from kindness to seriousness. Mr. Scamander, we are honored you remember the old name of our club. I apologize for meeting you under such circumstances. We have unavoidable difficulties, said the masked man holding Rove hostage. He stood with his wand raised, saluting respectfully, his voice a strange mix of male and female tones. Unavoidable difficulties? Don't make me laugh. I know your true nature. What started as a dueling club ended up collaborating with dark magic. You pretend to be fair duelists, but your actions are anything but, Scamander retorted, his tone neither humble nor overbearing. The truth of history is never absolute. In your eyes, the club may be a group of hyenas, but we are just small people struggling for our ideals. Everyone is trying to survive. There is no distinction between high and low, the masked man replied calmly, unfazed by Scamander's ridicule. Oh, really? I remember that among the tortured magical animals I rescued decades ago, at least half came from your hands. If the Saints' party hadn't collapsed, you would have been completely wiped out, Scamander said coldly. Then, I must thank you for your mercy back then. You intercepted so many of our goods, and we said nothing. Perhaps today is a good opportunity to clear up the past. The masked man responded emotionlessly, unaffected by Scamander's barbed words. Kidnapping my grandson is your idea of resolving the past? Scamander's expression grew colder. Tell me, what is your purpose? You didn't come here at night just to catch up with me. And shouldn't you introduce yourself first when you come to my house? You all have code names in your club. I remember saving a thunderbird from someone named Sack Leopard. You don't seem like a small person without a code name. You are joking. Thanks to your favor, I am Thestral from the Silver Spear Club. As the person in charge of today's operation, I must say it is not our wish to be your enemy, the masked man chuckled calmly. Originally, we just wanted to find an opportunity to enter your house and borrow something after you rested. We didn't expect to underestimate your strength. We hid so well, yet you still noticed us. We had no choice but to take this action. Scamander glanced at the distant birch tree in surprise. He hadn't sensed anyone hiding before, but his familiarity with the valley's flora made him feel something was amiss, prompting him to recall Rove. Could his actions have alerted the snake? But who was hiding in the distance? Were they accomplices? Meanwhile, Anduin, hiding quietly in the distance, wiped his sweat. It seemed the old man had indeed discovered him, but it also seemed the enemy had drawn out someone hiding even more secretly. As Anduin listened carefully to the conversation, he realized the old man was called Scamander by the Silver Spear members. If he guessed correctly, the old man in front of him was Newt Scamander, the author of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the very textbook on the protection of magical creatures. This was a legendary figure. He never expected to find Newt living here, and he wondered why these people with silver spears had traveled thousands of miles. What was their purpose? Before Newt and Anduin could continue their speculations, the masked man who called himself Thestral spoke again. The reason I came to bother you today is quite simple. It's about the box in your possession, he said, maintaining a calm tone. As long as you are willing to lend us that box, I will immediately release your precious grandson. I swear on the honor of the club. Newt's eyes widened in realization. I didn't expect that after so many years, you still desire it, he said. So, you are still dreaming of cross-continental smuggling, but I'm sorry, my suitcase has already been returned to Dumbledore. If you really want it, go to Hogwarts and find him. Thestral was clearly not satisfied with Newt's response, but he still smiled and slowly placed his wand against Rove's neck. Let's be honest. As early as last year in Brazil, our people saw that the box was still in your hands. If you continue to speak like this, don't blame me for being rude. The tip of the wand in Thestral's hand glowed faintly, and Rove trembled, looking at his grandfather with fear in his eyes. Newt's grip on his wand tightened. It was clear the intruders had come prepared and had done their homework. Anduin, watching from a distance, narrowed his eyes. The behavior of these men was truly despicable. It seemed action was necessary. At that moment, hurried footsteps sounded behind Newt. "Newt! Rove, what are you two doing outside again? It's late. Don't make me get mad at you." An old woman rushed out of the house, cursing. The old woman's skin was well maintained, with only a strand of white hair at her temples. The rest of her hair was still black and shiny. She wore an apron. But as she stepped outside, she noticed the strange scene. A group of masked men holding her grandson hostage. "You are Silver Spears?" she exclaimed, immediately pulling out her wand and pointing it at the intruders. She then turned to her husband. "What's going on? Why are these smugglers here? How could Rove be in their hands?" End of this chapter. Chapter 343. Someone behind Tina. Newt looked helplessly at his wife standing next to him. He had spoken loudly earlier, hoping to remind her to find a way to call for support. Who knew that Tina would rush out so straightforwardly? "Hello, Mrs. Scamander. Since both of you are here, let's resolve this unpleasant matter. Mr. Scamander, you'd better make a decision soon. I can't promise you that I can control the wand in my hand," the Thestral said, gesturing to his accomplices on both sides. The other three people around him quickly spread out, slowly expanding the encirclement. They were ready to use violence. When Tina saw their attitude, she immediately realized that the visitors were not friendly. She then looked at Newt with some annoyance. "How many times have I told you to keep an eye on Rove? Don't let him run around. Look at what happened now." Seeing that Tina was still nagging him, Newt couldn't help but roll his eyes. However, with his wife's company, he actually felt more relaxed, though he still remained wary. "Their target is the box," Newt said concisely, passing the information to his wife without looking back. These smugglers are still so worthless. I didn't expect them to show up again after so many years," Tina said angrily, staring at the crowd in front of her. Her lips moved slightly as she muttered a spell silently, but soon she frowned tightly, indicating her attempt had failed. "Don't waste your time, you two. Asking for help won't work. Recently, we have acquired some magical little things that can prevent outsiders from disturbing us and even prevent you from disturbing others," the Thestral said proudly after noticing Tina's failed attempt. Tina looked at Newt anxiously and shook her head slightly. Seeing this, Newt felt a headache coming on. Rove was in their hands now, making them wary. With external contact cut off, should they really hand over the box? Newt knew the importance of the suitcase. In his hands, it was a mobile farm, but if it fell into the hands of these smugglers, the consequences would be disastrous. As he guarded and thought about countermeasures, Newt suddenly noticed something was wrong. There seemed to be someone behind the Thestral. "Mr. Scamander, I think I've given you enough time to think about it," the Thestral said, hugging Rove in front of him. The wand in his hand pressed more deeply against Rove's neck, causing sharp pain and making Rove moan in distress. "I will count down from 10. If you really want to watch your precious grandson die cruelly, then so be it. You despicable guy, if you have the ability, let him go and let's fight one-on-one. Aren't you all about solving problems through duels?" Tina shouted angrily. 10. The Thestral completely ignored Tina's clamor and continued counting in a cold tone. Seeing the other party's determination, Tina felt a little flustered and looked anxiously at her husband. Over the years, he had always been the best at handling such emergencies. At this time, Newt was staring in the direction of the Thestral inexplicably, completely ignoring the countdown. He seemed to be thinking about something. Seeing her husband's abnormal state, Tina couldn't help but follow his line of sight. Her eyes froze slightly, as if she had also discovered something. 3. The Thestral felt annoyed seeing these two old folks staring at him indifferently and shouted louder. If the other party was really stubborn, he didn't mind getting rid of the hostage in his hands first and then killing these two tough guys. Anyway, there were jammers around, preventing any chance of escape. 2. Wait! Just as the Thestral shouted, 2, Newt suddenly intervened, halting the countdown. Oh, Mr. Scamander, I thought you really wanted to watch your precious grandson ascend to heaven. If you had cooperated earlier, none of this would have happened, the Thestral sneered, clearly pleased with Newt's apparent surrender. He was relieved. He didn't actually want to engage in a fight with these two renowned figures, as the outcome was uncertain. You put Rove down first, and I'll get you the box, Newt demanded, his eyes fixed on the Thestral. Hearing Newt's words, the Thestral felt a sense of relief, knowing that the old man was still concerned about his grandson. He lowered Rove, holding him by the armpit in front of him, and moved his wand away from Rove's neck. Hey, as long as you are willing to cooperate, everything will be fine. The Thestral's words were cut short as he felt a sharp, needle-like pain in the back of his neck. His body felt light, and his vision began to rise. In a moment of stunned realization, he saw his headless body. His last conscious thought was that he had been decapitated on the spot. Behind the Thestral stood a middle-aged man in a black cloak, floating in the air. He lifted Rove from the Thestral's arms and kicked the lifeless body away. The sudden turn of events left the other 3 masked men momentarily stunned, unable to react. The situation, which had seemed under control, had changed drastically with the captain's sudden demise. Newt and Tina, seeing Rove freed from the Thestral's grasp, wasted no time. Newt swung his left hand down, ejecting a small emerald-green ball from his palm, which hooked onto his finger like a yo-yo. With a flick of his wrist, the green ball transformed into a huge butterfly-like creature with ferocious, sharp teeth. It flapped its wings and charged at one of the masked men. Simultaneously, Newt hurled a curse at another masked man. Tina, an experienced auror, moved with precision and speed. With a flick of her wand, she unleashed several powerful and vicious spells at another enemy. The wizards of the Silver Lance Elite Tactical Unit quickly recovered and deftly deflected the attacks with a few swift movements of their wands. They all turned their attention to the middle-aged man in the middle of the battlefield. To turn the tide, they needed to recapture Rove as soon as possible. End of this chapter. Chapter 344. All are experts. At the center of the battlefield, a middle-aged man who had attacked and killed the Thestrals and snatched Rove was none other than Anduin, who had disguised himself with a mask. He didn't want to reveal his identity easily. In fact, when Tina first appeared, he had already started to act. To avoid being discovered, Anduin deliberately approached the Thestral at an extremely slow pace. Although he was invisible, physical collisions still existed, and any change in airflow during movement could alert the masked individuals. Fortunately, the masked individuals, including Thestral, were all focused on Newt and Tina in front of them and didn't sense anyone approaching. However, when Anduin got close to the Thestral, he didn't have a particularly good chance to attack immediately. The opponent's spirit was extremely tense, and their wand was always charged with magic. A careless move could harm the hijacked Rove. Luckily, Anduin's intuition was correct. Newt could indeed sense his presence, and once Anduin was in position, the old man cooperated with him seamlessly, allowing Anduin to make his move successfully. However, the situation remained tense. The remaining 3 masked men were quite strong, deflecting Newt and Tina's attacks with ease. The winged demon conjured by Newt to interfere with the enemy was frozen midair by a precise spell from one of the masked men. Then, all 3 focused their attention on Anduin. With a quick exchange of glances, the masked men divided their tasks efficiently. One stepped forward to engage Newt and Tina, while the other 2 attacked Anduin. They weren't ready to abandon their mission yet, and hoped to rely on one person to hold off the 2 old wizards, while the remaining 2 dealt with Anduin. If they could kidnap Rove again, they still had a chance. "Fiery!" shouted the masked man who rushed towards Newt and Tina. Instantly, a ball of blazing fire condensed on his chest and shot towards the house. The fireball transformed into a giant red eagle in midair, rushing towards the two elderly wizards with fierce tail flames. Meanwhile, the two men flanking Anduin launched their attacks. One of the masked figures swung his wand continuously, forming 5 aggressive curses in an instant. These curses burrowed into the thick snow on the ground, a technique known as sticking to the ground. The curses then attacked Anduin in parallel, 5 from above and 3 from below. Misty clouds. The other masked man cast the Cloud and Mist spell, intending to obscure Anduin's vision. The already poor visibility of the dark night was now further reduced by a thick layer of fog. After casting the spell, the masked man slightly moved his wand, and his body disappeared into the air. All experts, Anduin frowned slightly. From the tactics and decisions of the two masked wizards, he immediately judged that they not only possessed strong personal strength, but also had high tactical acumen. One was in charge of the main attack, while the other provided interference. The pressure on Anduin was immense, and he believed that with the level of these two legendary wizards, it was only a matter of time before they dealt with the masked man facing Newt and Tina. Although the thick fog completely obscured his view, it didn't affect Anduin much. However, he was still wary, as he had Rove with him. Anduin shook his shoulders, letting the cloak on his back fall off. The cloak, like a nimble bird, leaped onto Rove, fastening itself around the young man's shoulders and neck. In an instant, Rove was lifted into the sky by the flying cloak, becoming invisible as he ascended. With his hands now free, Anduin faced the 5 curses hurtling towards him, particularly the 2 earth-sticking curses aimed at his feet. He raised his wand, casting a 3-layer iron armor spell to block the attacks. Simultaneously, he jumped backward to dash, attempting to evade the earth-sticking curses. Suddenly, 2 tentacles made of white snow rose from the ground, resembling spider silk or white gravel. I wrapped around Anduin's feet, immobilizing him. Anduin realized this was the work of the invisible wizard, who had been silently chanting spells from more than 10 meters behind him. While most people might panic in such a situation, Anduin remained calm. He knew the priority was to deal with the earth-sticking spells first. Ignoring the snow tentacles, he decisively swung his wand downward, releasing a dazzling silver-blue plasma that struck the ground, hitting the 2 earth-sticking curses. With 2 loud bangs, the curses exploded, sending snow flying. Anduin then channeled his magic, causing electric currents to flash around his legs, breaking the snow tentacles. The 2 wizards, seemingly able to see through the thick fog, observed Anduin's response and felt their hearts sink. The middle-aged wizard before them was not only calm but also powerful. They realized they might not be able to defeat him quickly. Exchanging a glance, the 2 masked men decided to change their tactics. Anduin, too, understood that these opponents were fierce and well-coordinated. He knew he couldn't afford to hold back. To end the battle swiftly, he needed to focus on one opponent first. However, using a spell that required charging would take too long. In a split second, all 3 took action. Anduin waved his left hand, sending several silver lights flying from his cuff towards the invisible wizard. He then extended his wand, directing a powerful electric current at the other wizard. The masked man facing the lightning attack remained calm. He first cast a thick iron armor spell with his right hand, then flipped his left hand, revealing 5 amulets. He threw them at Anduin, ready for the next phase of the battle. Chapter 345, The Strange Curse. The few talismans immediately changed direction after being released, shooting towards Anduin like a curse. Using my own creations against me? Anduin sneered as he recognized the talismans. They were likely the ones he had sold to Azalea. These fools thought they could use them against their creator. With a flick of his wand, a surging current twisted like a thunder snake, its body resembling a silver whip striking the amulets. In an instant, the metal talismans crackled in the air like firecrackers, rendered useless. But Anduin's cluster lightning spell wasn't finished. The condensed plasma struck the masked man's iron armor curse solidly. The violent attack caused ripples on the transparent magic shield, making it seem as if the iron armor curse would shatter at any moment. The masked man, seeing his attack dispelled and the powerful spell from Anduin, struggled to maintain the iron armor curse. Anxiety crept in, and he glanced at his companion for support. Behind Anduin, another masked man had already begun casting a spell. A whirlwind formed around him, kicking up snow and gravel, creating a small tornado. At the same time, Anduin shot several silver lights at him. The masked man recognized these silver lights as 4 metal amulets and a small metal ball. His heart sank. Could this guy be from the Ministry of Magic? The way he used these items was identical to the standard equipment given to them by the unicorn. But there was no time to ponder. The masked man knew the power of these props, and without waiting for his spell to fully charge, pushed the whirlwind forward to meet the alchemy items. The talismans exploded upon contact with the whirlwind. Fortunately, the masked man had retreated a safe distance, avoiding the talisman's effects. The metal ball, however, unfolded into a large silver net, shimmering with faint currents and magical aura. It stuck to the tornado, and within 2 seconds, the whirlwind lost its magical support and dissipated. The net, losing its driving force, fell to the ground. The masked man was annoyed. His carefully accumulated magic had been nullified by a simple alchemy item. But he saw his companion struggling against Anduin's powerful spells. If he didn't intervene, his companion would soon be defeated. "Drink!" the masked man yelled, mustering all his strength to cast a greenish-black spell like a ball of viscous tar at Anduin. Anduin, focused on the masked man in front of him, didn't expect such resistance. Seeing the iron armor curse about to collapse, he couldn't ignore the curse coming from behind. He needed to eliminate one of them quickly. With a swift motion, he slapped his waist, releasing a metal ball that flew behind him to intercept the attacking curse. This was Lincoln's Law Ball. As it faced the incoming spell, the magic ball immediately activated several iron armor spells, creating a strange and inexplicable magical barrier. Suddenly, Anduin turned around, attempting to bypass the magic ball in front of him. It turned out that the masked man behind him had used a tracking spell technique, remotely controlling the spell to alter its trajectory. However, this scene was also visible through Anduin's echo glasses. It seemed the masked man had high hopes for this spell, but Anduin had grown tired of playing with the tracking spell 2 years ago. Did they really expect to hit him with a deflected trajectory? Wishful thinking. As the spell moved, the Lincoln sphere quickly responded under Anduin's control. It flashed and moved, continuously blocking the spell's direction, even intercepting the magic ball. The moment the spell changed direction and slowed down, the Lincoln sphere collided with it directly. When the spell and the magic ball collided, the strange black and green spell adhered to the protective shield supported by Lincoln's magic ball. As it stuck, it began to erode the iron armor protective cover, producing a sizzling sound and emitting green smoke. In the blink of an eye, it almost melted through the cave, 2 layers of iron armor protection. Anduin was shocked by the movement behind him. This strong corrosive magic seemed to be a unique spell belonging to the Silver Spear. Not only did Azalea know it, but this masked wizard did as well. Seeing the magic shield propped up by Lincoln's magic ball rapidly eroded by the corrosive spell, Anduin realized it wouldn't be long before it reached the core of the magic ball. To be honest, Anduin wasn't sure if his magic ball could withstand such erosion. This prop had cost him a lot of valuable materials, and if it broke, it would be a significant loss. The masked man in front of him had been enduring the iron armor curse for quite a while. Although he looked precarious now, it was uncertain how long it would take to defeat him. Concerned about his magic ball, Anduin couldn't bear to let his treasure be destroyed here. He stopped attacking the wizard in front of him, turned around, and cast clear water like a spring on Lincoln's magic ball. The clear water enveloped the sticky ball of magic, producing a sizzling sound like pouring cold water into boiling oil. The water ball turned pitch black, but Anduin seized the opportunity to retrieve Lincoln's sphere. As soon as he retracted the magic ball, Anduin keenly sensed a wave of magic emanating from beneath his feet. He immediately jumped to the side, just in time to see several sharp stone edges spring up from the ground where he had been standing. The wizard behind him had attacked again while he was handling the magic ball. Anduin glanced at the cluster of stone cones, recognizing it as a type of magic he had never seen before. This silver spear had many unique spells at his disposal. The masked man, seeing that his surprise attack had failed, immediately activated his magic power and began muttering spells under his breath. End of this chapter. Chapter 346, Dead Without a Whole Corpse. Seeing this, Anduin naturally couldn't let the other party get what he wanted. He raised his hand and shot at the opponent without hesitation, then threw out a silver chain, which was the spirit-binding snake. This was a metal mesh device he had used before, known as the spirit-binding lock. It effectively neutralized the opponent's powerful spell. However, the materials for that item were relatively expensive, and he only had one. Now he could only make do with the smaller metal snake. As for Anduin's galloping spell, the masked man had no choice but to cancel the spell he was preparing and prioritize blocking the sharp attack. After interrupting the opponent's spell, Anduin turned his attention back to the wizard he had been focusing on. The wizard was at the end of his strength, and Anduin couldn't afford to be held back by the person behind him. He had to press on and finish him off. The masked man, who had been under Anduin's relentless assault, saw that Anduin was targeting him again. He couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. This bastard is relentless, he thought. Now he only felt the hand holding his wand aching, making it impossible to fight back. He had to find a way to preserve his life. The masked man mobilized the last of his magic power, pointed his wand at the ground, and began to sink into it slowly, attempting to escape. Anduin smiled coldly at this attempt. He leaped high with a crack, grabbed his wand, and struck the ground hard upon landing. A strong current pierced the ground. At this point, only the masked man's head was left above ground. He let out a violent scream. Ah! His body twitched continuously, wisps of blue smoke rising from him, and the smell of burnt flesh filled the air. Glare! The masked man behind him managed to free himself from the metal snake and saw his companion being electrocuted to death. He couldn't help but shout his teammate's code name. Seeing two of his teammates die tragically at Anduin's hands, he felt a surge of anxiety. It wasn't because of any deep bond with his companions, but because the situation was critical. If he was the only one left, he wouldn't be able to handle this formidable enemy. Avada Kedavra! In desperation, the masked man cast the killing curse at Anduin. Normally, they rarely used the 3 unforgivable curses because, against a strong opponent, these high-consumption spells were not more effective than other spells and would waste more mana. Additionally, using the unforgivable curses had adverse effects on one's spirit and soul, which was detrimental for duelists who needed to stay calm and maintain a firm will. Anduin didn't blink when he saw the killing curse coming. The Lincoln ball he had just recovered from his body automatically bounced out, transforming into a metal round shield that firmly blocked the curse, leaving him unscathed. The wind and clouds suddenly rolled. At this moment, Tina's incantation sounded from the other side of the dense fog. A strong wind blew away the remaining fog, clearing the scene. As their vision returned, they saw Newt and Tina walking out calmly. Newt was holding a metal jug that resembled a military jug from Anduin's previous life, though it was smaller and narrower. A gentle smile spread across Anduin's face as he saw his allies emerge. A stream of water continuously gushed out of the kettle. The clear water flowed to the ground, spreading out and hovering around Newt like a loyal, magical blanket. Observing this, Anduin thought it resembled Gara's sand gourd, except this one flowed with water instead of sand. Not far from Newt and Tina lay the remains of the masked man who had previously attacked them. His body was scattered in pieces, frozen into a large lump of ice before being shattered. Large chunks of ice still clung to his limbs. Tina, holding her wand, approached the two who were still confronting each other. She glanced coldly at the masked man, now reduced to just a head on the ground after being electrocuted by Anduin. She then looked up at Anduin. "Sir, thank you for your help, but can you put my grandson down now? It's late at night, and in this cold weather, he might catch a cold," Tina said, frowning slightly. Anduin nodded silently. He stretched out his hand and swiped in the air, causing the cloak wrapped around Rove to slowly descend towards Tina. The cloak then flew back with a swoosh and draped itself over Anduin's shoulders. Seeing Rove safe, Tina felt a wave of relief. She was now convinced that Anduin had no ill intentions towards them. Before, she had been secretly wary of this stranger. As soon as Rove landed, he threw himself into his grandmother's arms. Unable to speak due to a curse, he could only make excited woo-woo sounds. Tina held him tightly, lightly touching him while scolding. "Rove, how many times have I told you not to run around at night? You never listen. Look, you almost got into serious trouble today." She pretended to tap Rove's head with her wand. Rove, however, ignored her scolding. He looked up at his grandmother, then at Anduin, and said excitedly, "Grandma, did you see that? I was flying. I didn't use a broomstick. I flew directly in the sky. It was so cool. And that big uncle." Rove pointed at Anduin. "He was so handsome. He defeated those two scoundrels all by himself. I saw it from the sky. Even though the fog was thick, I could see flashes below. It was so exciting." Tina's face darkened with anger. She realized that Rove had witnessed a death and was excited about it. Quickly, she covered his eyes with her hands, refusing to let go. Meanwhile, Newt, ensuring his family was safe, turned his serious gaze to the last remaining masked man. End of this chapter. Chapter 347, Sneaking Out. At this moment, the last masked man left on the scene felt a chill run down his spine. His 3 teammates had all been killed, and he couldn't snatch Rove away. Moreover, he was in poor condition after the previous battle, with less than half of his magic power remaining. Now, he had to face 3 powerful enemies. To prevent Newt and the others from escaping, they had deployed anti-apparition jammers. Ironically, this decision had become a trap for themselves. Now, he couldn't escape even if he wanted to. As he racked his brains for a countermeasure, Newt spoke up. "Remnants of the Silver Spear, you'd better surrender. If you continue to resist, you'll end up dead like your accomplices. If I'm not mistaken, this place has been completely blocked, and you can't escape." Newt looked at the masked man quietly, then glanced at Anduin, who had been silent not far away. "And to this gentleman, thank you very much for your help tonight. The Scamander family is willing to form a friendship with you. Would you like to tell us your name?" Anduin first glanced at the embarrassed masked man, then turned his head to look at Newt and Tina, showing a friendly smile. Newt and his wife smiled back. But then, something unexpected happened. After smiling at the two of them, Anduin suddenly moved, bursting out at an extremely fast speed towards the masked man. As he approached, he shot several spells at the masked man. His sudden move caught both the Newts and the masked man by surprise. The wizard with the silver spear reflexively parried the incoming spells, but in his panic, he was at a loss. Although he barely resisted the spells, Anduin quickly closed the distance. Anduin immediately took out 2 sonic boom talismans and launched them directly at the masked man. The infrasonic shock made the masked man dizzy. Immediately afterward, Anduin knocked him down with a close-range stun spell. Taking advantage of the situation, Anduin clamped the masked man under his arm and raised his hand. The spirit-binding lock, spirit-binding snake, and the rest of the talisman wreckage that had fallen on the ground flew towards him and were securely tucked into his cuffs. Without looking back, Anduin rose into the air with the surviving masked man and rushed out of the valley. His actions were smooth and swift, leaving Newt and Tina stunned. It took them a few seconds to realize that the wizard who had helped them had left without saying goodbye. "What is this man's background?" Tina asked, looking at Anduin, who was disappearing from sight, and then at her husband. "I've never seen him before, and his face is unfamiliar. But the fact that he could withstand 2 silver spears and kill one of them proves that he is not weak. Such a person wouldn't be an unknown talent," Newt said, tapping the metal bottle in his hand with his wand. The clear water surrounding him flowed back into the bottle as if it were alive. "He didn't seem to have any malice towards us, but why didn't he say a word from beginning to end, and even kidnap that gangster?" Tina frowned, puzzled. "He kidnapped the Silver Spear, which suggests that his target might be these Silver Spear people. And since he looks unfamiliar, could he be a foreign wizard?" Newt speculated, watching as the mysterious wizard disappeared from sight. It was already too late, so he calmly tidied up the scene. "What do you mean? He's a bounty wizard?" Tina pondered the possibility. The strange wizard targeting those smugglers aligned with the behavior of a bounty wizard. "It's possible. Aren't bounty wizards quite popular in the American wizarding world? Do you have any recollection of him?" Newt asked as he summoned a Patronus, ready to send a message to the Ministry of Magic. Today's incident had been quite a shock to them. How long have I been retired? Besides, I haven't met all the bounty wizards. Most of those guys in the United States aren't good people. Many of them pose as bounty wizards while engaging in all sorts of shady activities behind the scenes, Tina replied, curling her lips in disgust. It was clear she didn't think highly of bounty wizards. Regardless, Anduin had helped them before, even saving Rove's life. So, after realizing they couldn't figure out this mysterious benefactor, they decided not to dwell on it. The sudden appearance of these silver spear guns was a more pressing concern. Whether the strange wizard was a bounty hunter or not, at least he wasn't an enemy. After sending Rove back to the house, they waited for the Ministry of Magic to arrive. Meanwhile, after escaping with the masked man, Anduin made several anti-tracking maneuvers and used potions to eliminate any traces of their presence. He knew the Ministry of Magic had tracking devices, and he couldn't let them catch him. After a few laps in the distant forest, Anduin returned to Kiki's hiding place with the unconscious masked man. "Is that you, Your Excellency?" Kiki was startled when she saw the stranger suddenly appear beside her. After recognizing his clothes and attire, she asked tentatively, "It's me." Anduin realized he hadn't removed his disguise. He lightly tapped his face, revealing his original appearance, and let out a long sigh of relief. "My lord, what's the situation? I couldn't see anything from here, and I couldn't make a sound," Kiki said, relieved to see Anduin safe. She then noticed the person he was carrying. "My lord, who is this?" "This is tonight's catch," Anduin replied with a slight smile. He had initially thought he would return empty-handed, but he had managed to capture someone. He released the spirit snake from his sleeve, which wrapped tightly around the masked man. He also added a pair of anti-magic handcuffs to ensure the man's restraint. After making sure everything was secure, he reached out to remove the man's mask. Underneath the mask was the face of a middle-aged man with short light brown hair and a bit of a beard on his chin. He lay on the ground, eyes closed and face pale. "We can't stay here long. The Ministry of Magic will likely be on our trail soon. I've already used a lot of magic. You take him, and I'll apparate back on my own," Anduin instructed Kiki without further explanation. End of this chapter. Chapter 348, The Silver Spear. After Anduin and the others returned to Diagon Alley, he recounted the night's events to Kiki and Hog. The thrilling experience left Hog, who had stayed behind, both astonished and excited. "Wang, Your Excellency, are you saying this guy is with those smugglers?" Hog's eyes widened as he looked maliciously at the stranger tied up in Anduin's laboratory. "Yes, and remember, tonight's events must remain a secret. I kept quiet during the operation to avoid my voice being recognized. Familiar magic like Flying Crow would have been useless," Anduin warned the two in front of him. "Understood, my lord. But didn't you use a lot of alchemy props during the battle? Won't that be associated with you?" Kiki asked curiously, nodding solemnly. "The situation was urgent, so we had to rely on equipment. However, the props seen by the Newts were all standard. These items were also found on the man with the silver spear, so it shouldn't reveal too much information," Anduin explained. He recalled when he used the spirit-binding snake and spirit-binding lock, they weren't seen by the others. The sonic boom talisman he used at the end might reveal some information, but it could be attributed to equipment leakage. "My lord, you've helped the Newts a lot. Why be so cautious?" Hog asked, puzzled. "We have no choice. Judging from tonight's situation, the strength of the silver spear should not be underestimated. If the Ministry of Magic knows, it's one thing, but if the silver spear finds out, it could lead to unpredictable consequences." Anduin shook his head, then looked at the prisoner again. "Besides, if my identity is exposed, I wouldn't have been able to bring this guy back. Let's see how much we can learn about the silver spear from him." Anduin smiled lightly, and both he and the dog turned their attention to the prisoner. "Your name and code name?" Anduin asked. "Solve Morrison, Izeron," the prisoner replied, looking dazed after drinking Veritaserum. "What is your occupation, and what organization do you belong to? Who do you work for?" Anduin continued. "I'm an employee of the Ellerby and Baldmore Broomstick Production Company in Germany. I'm a member of the Silver Spear Dueling Club's Short Spear, and I'm part of the Sphinx infiltration squad, Solve answered. Anduin raised his eyebrows. This guy was a foreigner, and the Silver Spear was still called a dueling club? Was the Short Spear class their internal grading system? And was Sphinx just the name of their team, or a code name? Curious, Anduin asked for clarification. The Silver Spear has always been a dueling club. Members are commonly known as Silver Spears. The club is divided into two parts, the Silver Spear and the Silver Gun. The Silver Spear is the armed force for external activities, while the Silver Gun consists of headquarters staff, including some internal personnel, Solve explained. But to become a member, you must pass the club's test. Only after successfully obtaining your own Silver Spear or Silver Gun can you be considered a real member. Short spears and short guns are low-level members, while long spears are high-level members, he continued. Each member gets a corresponding code name, usually named after a magical animal. The Sphinx is a spear responsible for commanding and managing infiltration troops. We all belong to his subordinate Short Spear. Besides me, there are Thestral, Runhorse, and Glaring. I don't know their real identities. Our identities are only known to the spear, and short spears cannot inquire about each other's details. Anduin fell into deep thought upon hearing this. The structure of the Silver Spear organization is quite straightforward, consisting of only two levels. The terms Silver Spear and Silver Lance merely differentiate between expatriates and internal personnel. This organization maintains a high level of secrecy, and it's unclear if their superiors have tampered with their memories. We should start with some simple, low-secret questions to avoid situa tie-ins like Torquils, where asking key questions leads to a dead end. Do you have any accomplices in the British wizarding world? What's their code name? What's your mission tonight? Anduin asked, focusing on non-sensitive questions. I only know Thunderbird. Sphinx instructed us to receive information from Thunderbird upon our arrival in England and to follow his instructions. However, Thunderbird only sent Scamander's address through a secret letter. We haven't met in person, Iseron replied. Thunderbird also directed us to a residence in Godric's Hollow to pick up some equipment. According to him, this equipment will help us complete our task more easily. Sphinx's order for tonight is to go to Scamander's house and steal a suitcase, which is a small piece of space equipment capable of holding and breeding a large number of living creatures. It is said to be the work of Dumbledore, the great British alchemist. After stealing the equipment, we are to notify Thunderbird. The mission will be completed once we hand it over to him. Anduin nodded silently. There are indeed alchemical items that can hold living creatures, such as magical tents or houses enchanted with the straightening curse. However, he had never seen any alchemical props that could meet both requirements of holding a large number of living creatures and being small in size. This limitation is mainly due to the materials used. Anduin's space ring can hold many items, but it can't hold living creatures. Props that can hold living creatures are usually too large and immovable. Anduin realized that if smugglers like the Silver Spear obtained such equipment, it would significantly impact the smuggling business. Seeing that Iseron was answering willingly, Anduin decided to delve deeper. What about your wands and masks, and how do you pass information to Thunderbird after completing your mission? Our Silver Spear Club takes pride in having aspen wands that are both pure and powerful. All wizards who wish to join the club or be recruited must undergo the club's tests, the most important of which is a duel. Only after passing the test can one receive their own aspen wand and mask. These items also serve as symbols of each member's identity, Iseron explained. End of this chapter. Chapter 349, The Fool. Only after possessing a magic wand can we be called companions, and we can obtain corresponding resources from the club. Of course, we must complete some voluntary work for the club, Iseron explained. And the way to notify Thunderbird is naturally through the mask. As Iseron mentioned the mask, his face suddenly contorted with a ferocity even greater than when Anduin had tortured Torquil. There is no need to continue answering this question. Anduin immediately interrupted, noticing Iseron's distress. With Anduin's permission, Iseron's expression gradually returned to normal. It seemed the club had tampered with their memories, causing a stress reaction whenever they touched on certain secrets. Anduin wondered if it was the Slytherin's mental protection spell. If so, he might be able to break it. But for now, it was better to ask more questions while the potion's effects were still active. Using legilimency could be troublesome due to the complexity of memories and the sensitivity of general memory protection, which could backfire. Let's talk about magic. What's the deal with the magic that allows you to escape from the ground and the powerful corrosive magic? Anduin redirected the conversation, keeping a close eye on Iseron's mental state. That's the shuttle technique and the corrosion spell. These magics are secret within the club. The club advocates one-on-one duels and the collection of spoils related to duels. There are many unique magics and research materials. Only by becoming a member of the club and earning a certain amount of merit can you learn them. The four of us were able to become members of the infiltration team because we learned the shuttle spell. As Iseron spoke, his expression became pained again, and Anduin had to stop him. It seemed that any internal information about the Silver Lance or their unique techniques triggered a mental block. However, operational details seemed less protected, possibly because they were temporary and not encrypted in time. Anduin realized that questions about the club's headquarters or the leader's identity would be confidential and unanswerable. He was more interested in the club's internal collection and rare knowledge. Given the situation, Anduin decided to ask operational questions, such as the previous activities of the Silver Spear in England and the operations Iseron had participated in. Unfortunately, the answers were not very enlightening. The Short Spear members of the Silver Spear Club had little contact with each other, communicating only with their corresponding spears. They usually lived according to strict guidelines. The club had operated in the UK before, but their actions were mostly on the European continent, involving small teams either hiding underground to gather information or stealing rare magical animals. This did not help Anduin understand the club's situation much better. After exhausting his questions, Anduin decided to give legilimency a try. Although he hadn't practiced this magic much, it had become almost instinctive. Investigating memories involving hands and feet movements was still a bit vague, but he had to try. If he could break through the memory blockade, it would be a significant breakthrough. Anduin quickly calmed down after hearing what was said. He then looked at Iseron and attempted to delve into his memories using legilimency. However, he soon encountered a significant obstacle. The memory blockade set up by the Silver Spear Club for its members was quite formidable. Anduin had only begun to explore Iseron's mind when he was met with strong resistance. A powerful surge of spiritual energy erupted from Iseron's mind, forcefully ejecting Anduin's consciousness from the memory space. Iseron then began to convulse uncontrollably. Moments later, he was reduced to a state of dementia, leaving Anduin stunned. When Anduin tried to probe Iseron's memories again, he found that almost all the crucial memories had been forcibly erased. "How is it, my lord? Can he still be saved?" And Chi-Chi, who had been assisting Anduin with the interrogation, were now at a loss due to the sudden turn of events. "No," Anduin replied, shaking his head helplessly. "The protective magic set by the Silver Spear in his mind is extremely aggressive. If it detects any tampering, it destroys the brain. This guy is now a fool." "Then what should we do next? Should I just kill the smuggler?" Hog bared his sharp teeth and looked at Iseron's neck with a ferocious expression. "Don't be rash," Anduin said, slapping Hog on the head. "Although he can't use his brain anymore, his physical condition is excellent, and his mana value is as high as 756 points. He is still valuable as a living subject. Killing him now would be a waste." "What? You mean we should keep him?" Hog asked, puzzled, glancing at Iseron with disdain. "Yes, for a while. I can use him to experiment with memory magic and test some memory recovery methods. Don't worry, if we no longer need him, I'll let you have him," Anduin said, frowning slightly as he stared at Hog. "Fine, but don't forget," Hog muttered reluctantly. "What should we do about the Silver Spear?" "From what I can tell, low-level club members know very little, and their important memories are encrypted. We need to find a high-ranking member. I suspect the Thunderbird active in the UK is likely a spear. Try to locate him first." Iseron mentioned that their communication key is the mask. I believe it might be a special alchemy item. I want to try to decipher it and see if it reveals any clues. I'm becoming increasingly interested in this silver spear, especially their unique magic and research materials. It's an organization with a history spanning hundreds of years. They must have some valuable secrets, Anduin said, his eyes gleaming with fanaticism. However, the next day, before Anduin could begin his formal research on the mask, he was visited by a group of Ministry of Magic employees. Chapter 350. Under Investigation. In the early morning of the next day, there was a knock on the door of Silver Flash Trading House. Anduin, dressed in regular clothes, walked out leisurely from the interior. He found 7 or 8 employees of the Ministry of Magic standing outside, all of them showing serious expressions and adopting a heavily guarded posture. "Good morning, everyone. My shop won't open for a while yet," Anduin said, opening the shop door and looking at the people in front of him with surprise. "Sorry, Mr. Wilson, we are not here for shopping today. We suspect that you are related to a serious case and we need your cooperation in the investigation," said the leading Auror, May Weiss, who had visited once before. She was wearing a stern expression and first spread out a document in front of Anduin, then scanned the surroundings of the shop from the corner of her eye before explaining the reason for their visit. Anduin quickly reviewed his actions from the previous night, and after confirming that he had left no traces, showed a kind smile to May Weiss. "Of course, no problem. You are very polite. If you need my cooperation, you could have just called me to the Ministry of Magic. Why come all the way here?" Anduin stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. "Please come in. Many of you haven't been to my place yet. Feel free to take a look around." While Anduin was speaking, May Weiss had been observing his expression, but didn't notice any flaws. After being invited in, the group of Aurors entered the shop with a little hesitation. They maintained basic restraint and vigilance while glancing sideways at the various products inside. "Why are you all so serious? Did something happen?" Anduin asked May Weiss with a puzzled expression. Seeing Anduin's seemingly ignorant demeanor, May Weiss felt a bit relieved. It didn't seem like the worst outcome they had predicted. However, as an experienced Auror, she did not completely relax her vigilance. She even warned a few lax-looking colleagues with her eyes before looking at Anduin with a straight face. "That's right. I have a few items here that I hope Mr. Wilson can explain to us why they appeared at the scene of the crime and in the hands of the suspect." May Weiss took out an anti-apparition jammer and a shielding jammer from her arms and placed them on the shop counter. "This is my jammer? You mean these pieces of equipment appeared in the hands of criminal suspects?" Anduin picked up a jammer and examined it, then looked at May Weiss with some surprise. "This is impossible. I only supplied a batch of these jammers to your Ministry of Magic, and since the opening of my business, I have not sold any of them. You must know that these are dangerous goods prohibited from sale. How could outsiders get them? Did someone get them from your Ministry of Magic, perhaps picked up on the battlefield or stolen?" Anduin asked, looking at the jammer in his hand with confusion. "Impossible," May Weiss shook her head seriously. "We have conducted an inventory of all the jammers in the Ministry of Magic and have recovered even the damaged equipment. There have been no omissions." "That's strange. Except for the jammers I delivered to you last time, I really haven't sold even a single jammer. You must know that this is contraband. Without the proper documents from the Ministry of Magic, I would never sell it to anyone." Anduin took out the company's ledger from the counter and pushed it in front of May Weiss. "Look, every transaction I made involving equipment above XXX level is recorded." During this period, May Weiss had been observing Anduin's expression, but he seemed genuinely ignorant. After checking the account book, she didn't find any flaws. "Aside from the jammers you mentioned, is there anything else you need to investigate?" Anduin asked, maintaining his calm demeanor. "Sold to the Ministry of Magic. Do you keep any other jammers?" May Weiss suddenly realized something and asked, tilting her head. "Yes, I have been keeping some stock. After all, if you really need it someday, it would be too troublesome to make it on order." Anduin nodded, then seemed to understand what she meant. "What do you mean? Impossible. I keep all these jammers extremely secure. Ordinary people can't steal them. Oh, Maywise frowned. Where do you store those stocks? Would you mind showing us? This. Anduin's expression showed a trace of uncertainty after hearing Maywise's request. However, he eventually nodded and led them into a room, opening a locker with a safe inside. You keep your things in this safe? How long has it been since you checked your inventory? Maywise glanced at the seemingly intact safe. It's been a few months. I can't sell these except to the Ministry of Magic. My safe is a special magical item. No one can open it except me, Anduin explained, gesturing towards the safe. How many jammers do you have in stock? Can you open the safe and show us? Despite Anduin's firm assurance, Maywise remained skeptical. I've stored 5 of each type of jammer, Anduin said as he placed his right hand on the safe and slowly input magic power. However, the safe didn't respond. Noticing this, Anduin's expression turned grim. What's wrong? Maywise asked quickly, noticing his change in demeanor. It's not right. The safe isn't responding to my magic power. It should open easily. There must be other spells attached to it. I want to try to break the spell, Anduin said, drawing his wand and aiming it at the safe. But Mavis stopped him immediately. Let us handle it, Mavis said, signaling to someone behind her. A male wizard stepped forward, crouched in front of the safe, and carefully examined its surface with his wand. How is it? Maywise asked nervously. It appears to have been transfigured. The magic is very strong and seems to have been in place for more than 10 days, the wizard reported carefully. Undo the transfiguration, and let's see, Maywise ordered. The wizard cast the restoration curse on the safe. The true appearance of the safe finally emerged, revealing a deep hole in the door. Everyone around was shocked by the sight. End of this chapter. Chapter 351, The Mole of the Ministry of Magic. This is a trace of a spell. There's no doubt about it. It's them. The wizard who stepped forward to inspect the safe carefully examined the damage and quickly identified the spell that caused it. The inside of the safe, now opened again, was naturally empty. Anduin, witnessing this scene, displayed a shocked expression in front of everyone. How is this possible? Someone stole something from the store, and I didn't realize it at all. And what kind of curse is this? It can break through the protection of my safe, which can withstand attacks below 400 points. Anduin exclaimed, still in disbelief. Mr. Wilson, you might not be aware, but this is a very domineering black magic used by the enemy. It is extremely penetrating. We have also suffered under this spell, but we can't disclose more details. Please forgive us, Mavis explained, seeing Anduin's bewildered expression. She smiled, thinking he had never encountered such magic before, and spoke with the authority of an experienced senior. Is there really such black magic? Have you caught these villains? Damn it, they dare to steal from me. The Ministry of Magic must not let these guys go. Anduin shouted emotionally, showing a look of hatred. Don't worry, you are also a victim of this incident, and I will report it to the officer, Mavis reassured him. Seeing the scene in front of her, she let go of her guard against Anduin. At the same time, she felt a growing fear of the Silver Spear organization. These smugglers actually dared to sneak into the residence of a Ministry of Magic supplier to steal. Mr. Wilson, this safe is very important evidence. We need to seal it up in the Ministry of Magic for further investigation. I also apologize for disturbing your rest. We will not take up any more of your precious time, Mavis said, thinking she had figured out the context of the whole matter, and then bid farewell to Anduin. It doesn't matter. If it weren't for you, I might have been deceived for a longer period of time. Please catch this thief. So many jammers are lost, and the safe I spent a lot of materials on was also destroyed. This has caused us great harm and a lot of losses, Anduin said sincerely. If you need any help, please come to me at any time. As long as I can catch these gangsters, I am willing to provide any assistance. After hearing Anduin's guarantee, Mavis felt moved, as if she had thought of something. However, she needed to discuss it with her superiors before making a decision. She then led everyone from the Ministry of Magic to use the fireplace in the store to return to the Ministry of Magic. Upon returning to the Auror headquarters, Minister Budnor, Director Amelia Bones, Moody, Scrimger, and others were gathered to discuss countermeasures. How is it, Mavis? Is Anduin related to this incident? Moody asked nervously upon seeing Mavis return. He had a good relationship with Anduin and would be deeply troubled if there was a connection to the Silver Spear. Mavis shook her head and then took out the damaged safe. Anduin's Silver Flash firm was burglarized by those guys. According to Anduin, he had a total of 5 pairs of jammers in stock, and now only 4 pairs remain, proving that the other pair is in the hands of the thieves. Amelia immediately stepped forward to inspect the safe. Her face froze when she saw the corrosion wound on the door. It's a corrosion curse. It seems that the Silver Spears did indeed steal from the Silver Flash Trading Company. They actually went to the Ministry of Magic suppliers to steal things. It seems that our use of these jammers in the last operation caused them significant losses. Minister Budnor quickly deduced the other party's motives. However, not everyone in the Ministry of Magic knows about the equipment of the jammer. How could they have known? Specifically, target the jammer and carry out a special theft? You must know that when the safe was discovered, it had been restored to its original shape using the transfiguration technique. Apart from the jammer, Anduin didn't lose any other items, May Weiss said, rubbing her chin thoughtfully. What do you mean? Moody asked, his eyes widening as he began to piece things together. I think the trader's status is either very high or they were present during the product demonstration. Otherwise, it's hard to explain why these Silver Spears had such a clear target, May Weiss speculated. After hearing her explanation, the expressions of the others changed. They had long suspected that the Silver Spear might have spies within the Ministry of Magic, but they never considered that the trader could be someone high-ranking. May Weiss's guess seemed reasonable. On the day of the demonstration, Minister Budnor had enforced strict confidentiality, and everyone present was forbidden from revealing any details about the equipment. After the arrests, the jammers were never shown to the smugglers. Even if the smugglers knew there was a device to prevent their escape, they wouldn't know what it looked like. So how could they have accurately targeted it? Everyone began to scrutinize their companions, wondering if the traitor was among them. Minister Budnor frowned slightly and glanced at May Weiss with a hint of reproach. Such speculation should have been kept private. Voicing it publicly could damage morale. However, he knew May Weiss was straightforward and often spoke her mind without considering the consequences. Compared to the so-called spies, I am more inclined to believe in the basic loyalty of my colleagues in the ministry. What we need to do now is solve the problem, not suspect each other, Budnor said loudly, trying to rally the group. That's right. Even if there are traitors in the ministry, there are likely only 1 or 2, and they won't be able to cause much trouble. I know this Silver Spear. They operate with a small, elite team. Most of their visible activities are carried out by peripheral members or collaborators, Moody added, nodding in agreement. What we should focus on now is the purpose of their operation. Mr. Scamander is a highly respected magizoologist and a legendary wizard in our British wizarding world. Attacking him in his own home is a direct provocation to the entire British Ministry of Magic, Amelia said firmly. I have arranged a team of Aurors to protect the Scamander family. However, after investigating the scene, we didn't find many useful clues, especially regarding the strange wizard who captured a Silver Spear member. They left no trace, Moody reported to the group. End of this chapter. Chapter 352, Cracking the Mask. How did Mr. Scamander describe that mysterious wizard? Minister Budnor asked, clearly concerned about the sudden appearance of the enigmatic figure. The wizard is between 35 and 50 years old, tall and powerful. He can use lightning-related magic and has a cloak that allows him to fly. Additionally, he used alchemical items similar to the Sonic Boom amulet, May Weiss reported, flipping through her memo. Since when did our amulets become so common? Why does everyone have them? Scrimgeour remarked, glancing at Moody with a hint of exasperation. Could this stranger be connected to Anduin? Before Moody could respond, May Weiss interjected. I don't think that's likely. The amulet is not as difficult to obtain as the jammer. I observed Anduin closely, and judging by his reaction, he seemed unaware of this wizard. That mysterious wizard is more likely a bounty hunter from abroad. Judging by his attitude towards the Scamander family, he doesn't seem like an enemy. We should still focus on the Silver Spear, Minister Budnor agreed, nodding thoughtfully. Speaking of which, the Silver Spears suffered significant losses this time. They already had few members, and now they've lost 4 more. We must be cautious of their retaliation, Moody said with a teasing smile. Indeed, to prevent their backlash, everyone should proceed carefully, Minister Budnor concurred. He then turned to Maywasi. By the way, go to Anduin later and ask him to stop producing jammers for now. If we need them later, he can make more. Also, remind him to be cautious, as he has caught the attention of the Silver Spear. Yes, Minister, Maywasi nodded obediently. She then hesitated before adding, Minister, I have an idea. May I share it? Go ahead. We seized 3 pairs of Silver Spear masks. They seem to be alchemical items. Could we ask Anduin to study them for us? He's the only capable alchemist in England besides Dumbledore, and it wouldn't be appropriate to bother Dumbledore with this. Minister Budnor raised his eyebrows, considering the suggestion. That's a good idea. The ministry found nothing after examining the masks. Maybe Anduin can uncover something. Bring a mask to Anduin and ask for his help. Also, stay at Silver Flash Trading Company for a while to ensure his safety. When Anduin received another Silver Spear mask, he looked at Maywasi in surprise. You mean the Ministry of Magic wants me to study this alchemical item? Yes, this mask is crucial to our future work and is related to the thieves who stole your equipment. We hope you can help, and I'll stay to ensure your safety, Maywasi explained, thinking Anduin might be reluctant. I understand. It's a small task, and I'll start right away, Anduin nodded. He had planned to decipher the mask anyway, and now he had the ministry's support. It was better to study the mask openly, and any findings could be shared with the ministry to guide their efforts. Anduin immediately began his work. With no customers in the store, he took Maywasi to a secluded room. He started with a simple inspection of the mask, trying to determine its material. However, after careful examination, after extensive exploration and observation, Anduin still couldn't determine the material used for the mask. The texture was somewhat like animal skin, but it was softer and thinner than leather, and it weighed very little in his hand. This feeling, why does it seem more like an artifact? Anduin mused, his face lost in thought. Maywasi, who was next to him, noticed his immediate focus on the task and developed a good impression of the young man. She herself was a workaholic and respected all dedicated individuals. After failing to identify the material, Anduin tried to inject some magic power into the mask. He could feel the mask absorbing his magic, but it didn't display any magical patterns or reactions. It seemed more complicated than he had imagined. He then placed the mask on the table and began arranging various props. Measuring instruments, hammers, and magnifying glasses all lined up neatly. Maywasi, watching from the sidelines, was dazzled by the scene and felt an unfamiliar excitement. Anduin first tried to detect the runes inscribed inside the mask with a magnifying glass, but quickly failed. Unperturbed, he picked up the harmless hammer and struck the mask. After continuous analysis with the hammer, very fine magical lines finally emerged on the mask. Seeing this progress, Maywasi became even more excited. She immediately stood up and moved closer to observe. Do you recognize these lines? Anduin asked, noticing Maywasi's eagerness. Ah? Maywasi responded with a blank expression. I don't know them. It's just the first time I've seen it react. Isn't it amazing? Anduin couldn't help but curl his lips at her response. He thought to himself, You're just fascinated by the novelty. Why are you so close, hindering my work? Despite his internal complaints, he didn't say anything. Instead, he took out a magic camera and photographed the mask. The lines would dissipate after a while, so it was best to capture them first. He then placed the mask under a scope, similar to a microscope, and studied it with great interest. While he was observing carefully, Maywasi continued to watch him intently. She marveled at how professionals like Anduin could make progress so quickly, while the Ministry of Magic had studied the mask all night without any results. What? Maywasi was lost in her thoughts when Anduin suddenly noticed something. His eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. End of this chapter. Chapter 353. The Efficacy of Masks. The reason Anduin was amazed was not because of anything trivial, but because he recognized 2 familiar technologies embedded in the mask. These were the rune circle superposition method, and the blood link technology he had once encountered in the Travers family magic book. Although the magic patterns on the mask were intricate, Anduin quickly discerned that there were actually only 2 layers of rune arrays on it, thanks to his prior experience with more complex superposition systems. This meant that the mask theoretically had only 2 functions, but it was completely connected to the user's blood. This unique feature made it difficult for anyone other than the original owner to use the mask. The engraving method of the mask was also quite special. The magic lines were extremely fine, unlike those made with ordinary rune carving knives, making them hard to observe. Fortunately, Anduin had a special observation instrument. Otherwise, the magic patterns would have been invisible to the naked eye. "How is it? Did you find anything?" May Weissy asked, her curiosity piqued by Anduin's reaction. "It's very interesting," Anduin replied with a perfunctory smile, continuing his examination. May Weissy, feeling even more intrigued, watched intently, though she knew better than to disturb him while he was working. Anduin focused entirely on the rune patterns, aiming to distinguish the 2 layers of rune arrays and determine their respective functions. He meticulously wrote and drew on 2 pieces of parchment while observing through the scope. The mask's pattern, though simple, required careful attention due to the fine and detailed runes. He occasionally used a harmless hammer to aid his examination. After more than 2 hours of analysis, Anduin finally managed to separate and copy all the runes. He then shifted his focus to the 2 rune arrays. May Weissy, who had patiently waited with him, perked up when she saw Anduin's actions and leaned forward eagerly. "How is it? Have you cracked it?" May Weissy asked, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Anduin glanced at her silently, wondering if this aura was always this excitable. "Not yet. This is just the beginning. The next steps will require a lot of effort, but we have a clue." "Oh, what did you find?" May Weissy checked her pocket watch. "It's almost closing time, and I need to return to the Ministry of Magic. Tell me what you've learned so far so I can report to the director." "I can see that this mask has 2 functions, communication and identification. However, the specific details will only be clear after further analysis. The communication function seems to have a long-range effect, but the rune structure is unfamiliar to me and will take more time to decipher. If I can analyze it thoroughly, it might help you locate others with these masks," Anduin explained. "Really? If you can help us locate the rest of the criminals, that would be fantastic," May Weissy said, her excitement growing. "Your assistance is invaluable. I have to report this immediately. Go back quickly and report to the director." Anduin couldn't help but question the Ministry of Magic's approach. Were they really here to protect him? He thought he had a good understanding of their work style, but the fact that their protectors had to leave separately at the end of the day left him speechless. Fortunately, Anduin didn't want them in his way. After Mavis left via the Flu network, Anduin continued to study the spell in his hand calmly. He found the rune structure on the mask to be quite unfamiliar and powerful, representing a completely different alchemy style. Studying these rune arrays provided him with numerous ideas and valuable knowledge for his alchemy work. When the Ministry of Magic learned that Anduin had made significant progress in his research on the masks, they took it very seriously. The next day, Mavis brought another mask along with a promise from Minister Budnor. The minister assured that if Anduin could help the ministry crack these masks, they would place an additional order for alchemy equipment. This was also due to the fact that Anduin's products were highly effective. In truth, even without the ministry's promise, Anduin would have strived to complete the analysis. On one hand, he could gain more alchemy knowledge through the study of spells, and on the other, the silver spear was also one of his goals. After several days of diligent work, Anduin finally deciphered the specific functions of the mask. It had 2 primary functions, identification and communication. The new runes with identification capabilities could help the wizard wearing the mask identify others with similar masks. Additionally, the mask had a vision-assisting effect, allowing the wearer to see through fog, darkness, and other obscuring environments. This explained why the silver spears could fight effectively against the misty cloud curse. By analyzing this rune, Anduin enriched his rune library, finding it potentially more useful than the echo spell in certain scenarios. The communication rune was even more impressive. It could transmit messages to distant targets, outperforming Anduin's communication amulet. If Anduin's communication talisman was akin to a telegraph, allowing only remote responses, this rune was like a pager, capable of sending messages to distant targets. The mask's blood-binding effect ensured extreme confidentiality. Anduin also discovered that the rune's potential extended beyond this. It used a communication structure similar to the Flu network, but with a broader channel capable of outputting more magic power. Anduin believed that with further development, this spell could lead to communication equipment with telephone-like capabilities. However, despite understanding the rune's effects, Anduin couldn't use the mask to track the enemy directly due to the blood binding involved, which prevented outsiders from using it. To address this, Anduin decided to use blood to refine the mask of Izuran. Now that Izuran had become demented, his blood would suffice. Anduin wanted to see if he could bind himself to the mask of Izuran using this method. End of this chapter. Chapter 354, Sudden Attack. However, it takes at least a week to refine a bloodline. In order to deal with the Ministry of Magic, Anduin had been pushing back his research progress. Another week passed, and time entered the Christmas holiday. During this period, the business of the Silver Flash Trading Company was booming. After all, it was Christmas, and many young wizards were on holiday. Every day, numerous wizards came to choose gifts for the holiday. To manage the demands of the Ministry of Magic, Anduin secluded himself in the laboratory under the pretense of analyzing the mask. He left Kiki and Hog to watch the shop, and even had May Weiss, who was stationed there, help out. However, May Weiss, an Auror, was more focused on her tasks and was clumsy when helping, often having to follow Kiki's orders. Despite hiding away, Anduin was not idle. He studied the two newly obtained runes, extracting the part of the identification runes that aided vision and adding it to his monocle. He even planned to use the new types of amulets to create an upgraded version of the tracking glasses and the communication amulet in the future. Simultaneously, he was developing a communication locator using the same technology as the communication amulet, which could track locations along the Flu network. This was prepared for the faceless mask. If the next bloodline refining ceremony was successful, he would be able to find the person who received the information along the communication network when using the mask. After a week of debugging, the tracker was finally completed before the bloodline refining. Once the ceremony was completed tonight, he could try to find the Thunderbird by following the clues. After finishing all the preparations, Anduin checked the time. It was quite late and the store was close to closing, so he decided to visit the front store to see today's harvest. When he came outside the shop, he saw Mavis standing listlessly in front of the counter. Upon seeing Anduin, the active Auror immediately approached him. "How is it? Have you gained anything from today's cracking?" May Weiss would ask Anduin a few questions every day, and Anduin often hid because he found her too annoying. "Come on, today's progress is gratifying. I'm debugging tonight. Maybe tomorrow I can find the target along the mask," Anduin replied, not dismissing her this time. "Really? That's great." May Weiss cheered up immediately upon hearing his reply. "Why don't I stay here tonight? I can notify the department immediately when we have definite news." Seeing May Weiss's anxious look, Anduin shook his head helplessly. "Why are there such active Aurors? Don't you even have to celebrate Christmas?" At that moment, another customer walked into the shop. It was already late, and the shop was empty, with few pedestrians on Diagon Alley. Seeing another guest enter, May Weiss turned around to greet him reflexively. "Hello, may I help you?" May Weiss's professional ability had improved a lot recently while helping Anduin. She was very excited, having just received good news. "I'm not interested in ordinary rubbish. Don't bother me, I have eyes to see," the visitor said proudly after glancing at May Weiss. Seeing the rudeness of the visitor, not only May Weiss but also Anduin couldn't help frowning slightly. With some doubts, Anduin scrutinized the newcomer. The client was a male wizard about 40 years old, wearing a set of rather quaint plain wizard robes. This kind of attire was rarely worn by wizards nowadays, especially as it did not match the age of the wearer. The man had long black hair, sharp-edged facial features, and piercing eyes, giving off an intimidating aura. At this moment, a very unsettling feeling washed over Anduin. The man standing before him held a leather suitcase and pretended to be interested in the various display cabinets. His eyes, however, betrayed no joy, only blatant disgust. Seeing this, Anduin shook his head at Meiwei, who appeared a bit overwhelmed, and then stepped forward himself. "Sir, I'm the owner of this shop. Is there something specific you need? You don't seem to like these props very much," Anduin asked with a harmless expression. "Oh, you are the owner here, and you're quite young," the man remarked, looking at Anduin curiously after his introduction. "You've heard of me?" Anduin raised his eyebrows in surprise. This man knew him, but he had never seen him before. "I know of you. I heard you're a British war hero?" The man looked at Anduin teasingly, a slight smirk forming at the corners of his mouth. "That's just a title," Anduin replied, smiling and shaking his head. "I see you're quite self-aware," the man said coldly, clearly dismissing the title. Anduin narrowed his eyes slightly at the man's arrogance, but maintained a professional smile. "Perhaps you could call it modesty, but is there something about the products in the store that you find unsatisfactory?" Anduin inquired. "Unsatisfactory?" The man shook his head. "No, I'm not dissatisfied with the garbage. It's just a bunch of flashy things, not worth my time." He glanced at Anduin. "But it's impressive that you have such skills at a young age. It's a pity." With that, the man looked around the store with disdain and walked out without another word. Anduin watched him leave, puzzled by the encounter. The man had come into his shop, insulted his products, and then left without any apparent reason. Anduin continued to watch the man until he crossed the street in Diagon Alley. The man turned back, gave Anduin a disdainful smile, and then took out a white aspen wand, apparating out of sight. An aspen wand? A silver spear? Anduin's heart tightened as he realized the significance. "Mr. Wilson, that man forgot his suitcase," Meiwei pointed out, indicating the suitcase left in the middle of the store. She leaned forward curiously. "Not good," Anduin suddenly turned, shouting at Meiwei with urgency. End of this chapter. Chapter 355. I want them to die. Huh? Meiwei looked back, bewildered. But Anduin didn't have time to explain. He had already sensed the powerful magic emanating from the suitcase. Stretching out his left hand, he grabbed it, pulling Meiwei back with a tremendous force, causing her to fly in his direction. Anduin leaped up, holding his wand inverted, and aimed it fiercely at the suitcase. Just as Anduin jumped into the air, the suitcase exploded, releasing a wave of evil and tyrannical magic. A mass of bright red flames gushed out of the box. It was fiend fire. As the fiery flames prepared to explode, Anduin arrived. He channeled all his magic, and his wand burst into a dazzling glare. "Finite incantatem," he shouted. A powerful shockwave of magic erupted from his wand, shattering all the glass in the room and blowing away the surrounding alchemical props. Despite the impact, the fiend fire failed to burst out and was extinguished abruptly, like a tar-stained torch doused with tons of ice water. Cheeky, Hog, and Meiwei were thrown to the ground. When they finally regained consciousness and got up, shaking their heads, they saw Anduin standing in the middle of the room with a furious expression. "Damn it, I haven't even had time to find you, and you dare come to my door first," Anduin thought, seething with rage. He surveyed the chaotic scene, his murderous intent growing. He wanted nothing more than to destroy the one responsible for this attack. He knew exactly who the culprit was after seeing the aspen wand. "Since you dare to bring the flames of war to my door, don't blame me for being ruthless," Anduin thought, his eyes growing colder. Turning sharply, he glanced at Cheeky, who had just stood up. "Cheeky, restore the scene and take stock of the losses," he ordered. Then he looked at Meiwei, who was still rubbing her head. "Meiwei, inform the Ministry of Magic about the situation. I have some things to take care of, and I'll see you later." Without another word, Anduin apparated and disappeared. Chi-Chi turned to Hog, fear evident in her eyes. "Lord Anduin is really angry now. Something big is about to happen," she whispered. Meiwei also sensed the gravity of the situation. Someone had openly attacked Anduin's business, and the power of the spell indicated an intent to raise the entire place. She hurriedly used the Flu network to contact the Ministry of Magic. When Maywacey returned with Moody and a dozen aurors, the place had been restored to its original state under Cheeky's cleaning. However, most of the civilian products in the store were gone, clearly lost to the curse's final effect. Not long after everyone entered the business, Anduin emerged from the inner room, holding a white mask and wearing a grim expression. "Anduin, I came as soon as I received the news. Are you okay?" Moody asked, walking forward with his cane, concern etched on his face. "I'm fine," Anduin replied, shaking his head. "My previous research on masks has yielded results. Now I'll take you to find the bastard who tried to burn my house down." Moody hesitated, not expecting Anduin to be so direct. "Anduin, don't be impulsive. I know you're angry, but those guys are dangerous. Let us handle it." "Isn't it just the Silver Spear? What's so dangerous about them? They've attacked my home. Do you think I'm just going to sit back and do nothing?" Anduin's eyes blazed with determination. Anduin stared coldly at Moody. "How did you know?" Moody asked, surprised that Anduin had revealed the secret so quickly. "Come in with me," Anduin said, giving Moody a look before walking inside. Realizing it was best to keep their conversation private, Moody ordered the others to stay put and quickly followed Anduin. Once they were alone in the room, Moody couldn't wait to ask again, "How did you know about the Silver Spear organization, and how are you so sure that the person who attacked you was from the Silver Spear?" "I've been paying attention to this organization for a long time. Have you forgotten?" Anduin reminded Mu that he had been inquiring about the Silver Spear from him and Arthur 2 years ago. "As for why I knew they were attacking me, I clearly saw the attacker using an aspen wand. I suspect the person who appeared today was Thunderbird." "Oh, you even know their code names?" Moody looked at Anduin in surprise, then seemed to realize something. "What else are you hiding from me? You should make everything clear now to avoid misunderstandings later." "It looks like you've guessed it too," Anduin said, noting Moody's expression. "Yes, I was the one who supported the Scamander family that night, and I was the one who killed those 2 Silver Spears." Anduin had initially wanted to keep his identity hidden to protect himself, but with people directly confronting him, there was no point in further concealment. If he couldn't demonstrate his true strength to the Ministry, it would be detrimental to him. However, Anduin chose not to reveal Azalea's identity as a spy, as she was still useful to him. "Really, it was you?" Moody was surprised by Anduin's candid admission. Initially, he hadn't considered Anduin as a suspect, thinking he was just another bounty wizard skilled in alchemy. It was only after clearing the Silver Spear that he realized the possibility. Moody couldn't help but look at Anduin with newfound respect for his ability to keep such a secret. "I learned from a surviving Silver Spear member that a spear codenamed Thunderbird was in charge in the UK. I wanted to unmask this person and find their traces. Instead, I became the target, and they appeared right in front of me," Anduin said, his expression turning grim. End of this chapter. Chapter 356, Level 1 Combat Readiness. "So you've been hiding your identity to avoid retaliation? I understand your reasoning, but I didn't expect them to be so relentless." Moody nodded thoughtfully. "What are you planning to do next? Have you been able to locate him?" "Yes," Anduin confirmed. "The Mask of the Silver Spear has a long-distance communication function, similar to my communication amulet. It can store communication beacons. I just tested it and found that there are only 4 masks in the UK. After excluding the 3 Silver Spears that were killed, the remaining one must belong to the Thunderbird. Then there's no need to rush. These guys are hard to deal with, mainly because they are so elusive. I prefer to launch a siege after a more careful deployment," Moody cautioned, worried that Anduin might act recklessly out of anger. "No," Anduin shook his head. "Although I am very angry, I haven't lost my mind. The reason I want to track it now is that during my observation, I noticed that the target's appearance this time is quite special." "Special? How so?" Moody frowned, puzzled by Anduin's words. Then, as if understanding dawned on him, he glanced at Anduin in surprise. "Could it be?" "Yes, the other party appeared in the west," Anduin said calmly. "I suspect that they are in Ireland now." "So that's it," Moody realized. "It seems they aim to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. On one hand, they attack you to eliminate the alchemy equipment supplier who indirectly caused them trouble. On the other hand, They create a major incident here to attract the attention of the Auror Command, using the distraction to carry out a smuggling operation. It's a calculated move. Moody was no longer surprised by Anduin's knowledge of Ireland and the smuggling operation. He assumed Anduin had obtained the information from the captured wizard. As for the current status of the survivor, Moody wisely chose not to ask too many questions, trusting that Anduin was on their side. "That's my guess, too," Anduin agreed. "The fact that they went to such lengths to sabotage suggests that this smuggling operation might be larger in scale than the one you uncovered last time." "I see. It seems these guys are planning something big," Moody acknowledged. "We can't waste any time. Let's start now, but I'll need you to lead the way." "With pleasure," Anduin replied coldly, then turned to look at Moody. "By the way, remember to keep this operation secret. We need to catch them by surprise." Moody nodded solemnly, understanding the importance of discretion. He made a decisive decision and immediately turned around to address the Aurors outside. "Attention, everyone," Moody called out, his face serious. "We are now at Level 1 combat readiness. Everyone must strictly adhere to the secrecy laws. No messages to the outside world, no use of the Patronus charm, no receiving owl letters, and no leaving the team without permission." The surrounding Aurors, seeing Moody's grave demeanor, looked at each other in confusion but nodded in agreement due to his authority. Moody then turned to an Auror standing nearby. "Emmeline Vance, come here. We have important information to discuss. That requires you to return to the Ministry of Magic immediately and report to Minister Budnor and Director Burns." Upon hearing this, Emmeline knew something was wrong. As a senior Auror, she was not typically summoned for ordinary matters. She was only called upon for extremely confidential information. Emmeline was a member of the Order of the Phoenix, and this urgency was unusual. Before Emmeline could respond, Moody leaned in close and whispered a few quick words. The news he shared left her shocked, and she looked at him in surprise. After confirming the gravity of the situation through his eyes, she said nothing more. She immediately threw some flue powder into the fireplace and disappeared from the scene. "Very good, then everyone come with me," Moody commanded, turning back towards the fireplace. The rest of the Aurors followed their old captain, though a few less experienced ones muttered among themselves. Anduin observed this and couldn't help but shake his head. The individual skills of these Aurors were commendable, but their discipline and tactical quality were inconsistent. They couldn't even follow orders properly. Moody reached the fireplace and looked at Anduin. "Next, we will transit to the eastern part of the island of Ireland through the flue network. After that, you will conduct another test to confirm that the target is really there." Anduin nodded, acknowledging the appropriateness of the plan. "Anduin and I will go first. Pay attention to the communication amulet and follow after receiving my signal," Moody instructed the rest of the Aurors. He then stepped into the fireplace and shouted, "Balakas Figo Bar." After traveling through the flow network, Anduin arrived to find Moody already waiting. They were in a bar with an environment similar to the Leaky Cauldron, but it was empty due to the late hour. This is the eastern part of Northern Ireland. The owner of the bar is Figo Finnegan. If you need to go to Ireland, you can locate here, Moody briefly explained. He then urged, "Hurry up, I don't know if it's too late to catch up now." Anduin nodded, then took out the mask that belonged to Iseron and put it on. He also retrieved a device resembling a large compass and began fiddling with it. "The target location is still to the east of us, about 150 kilometers away, almost near the sea. Do we have any other transfer points at that distance?" Moody shook his head. "No, but the last time we solved the case against the Silver Spear, it was also in the west of Ireland. I still remember the location. We can apparate there first." "Okay, then let the others follow up. Let's rush over and see what we can find," Anduin agreed. End of this chapter. Chapter 357, Tactical Arrangement. After Moody finished sending the message and all the Aurors were in place, everyone apparated in batches to the location in Ireland where they had previously hunted down the smugglers. Upon arrival, Anduin tracked the communication signal on the mask again and confirmed that the target was only about 30 kilometers away. Seeing that the target was close at hand, Moody was visibly excited and immediately called everyone together to arrange a battle plan. Mevis, you and 4 others will deploy anti-apparition jammers as soon as we arrive at the scene. The remaining 10, including Anduin, will follow me. Just like with the smugglers last time, don't let anyone escape. Also, try to avoid harming the magical animals they are escorting. Moody's face was fierce as he shouted orders to the group. Yes! The Aurors, realizing they were on a combat mission to chase down smugglers, were eager and ready for action. Few Aurors are afraid of trouble. Wait a minute, Anduin interjected, feeling shocked by Moody's crude tactics. Are we just going to rush in and start fighting? Moody glanced at Anduin strangely, and the other Aurors also looked at the young man with curiosity. Haha, the kid might not have seen large-scale wizard battles before. Maybe he's scared, an older male Auror joked. Young Mr. Wilson, we're here to catch criminals, not duel. There's no need for formalities. Many Aurors around couldn't help but chuckle. They thought the young man was naive about the harsh realities of their world. Moody, however, gave them a stern look and then turned to Anduin with a searching gaze. He knew the young wizard's capabilities. Anduin was a ruthless character who didn't hesitate to kill. Now, we don't know the number of targets, the terrain, or their configuration. Aren't you afraid of making mistakes if we just rush in like this? Anduin asked seriously, ignoring the teasing eyes of others. I understand your concerns, but time is pressing. Who knows how far their smuggling activities have progressed? We've already fought these guys once before, so we have some idea of what to expect, Moody explained. Our usual method is to send someone with an invisibility spell and shielding jammers to observe and then report back. While effective, it's too slow. The incident happened suddenly, and we must act quickly. Don't worry. We usually operate this way. Although these guys next to you might not seem reliable, they won't back down in battle. They're all comrades worth relying on, Moody reassured. The Aurors were surprised to see their boss explaining so much to a young wizard. Moody was usually blunt and quick to anger. Anduin nodded slightly but then shook his head. I understand, but such a deployment is too hasty. He stretched out his right hand and separated his fingers one by one. Before any battle, we must determine several elements in advance: weather, terrain, number of people, firepower configuration, and other interference factors. While speaking, Anduin continued to outline his thoughts on a more strategic approach. Anduin spread out his 5 fingers one by one, then withdrew the rest, leaving only his thumb raised. The first item is the weather, he began. It's night and visibility is low. This makes it easy to lose track of the target when rushing into the enemy's line, which could lead to unnecessary casualties. Second, the terrain. Anduin extended his index finger. We don't know the exact terrain the opponent is in. Ireland is mostly mountainous. If they're in a forest or on high ground, it could put us at a disadvantage. They might even be hiding in underground tunnels. Third, the number of people. We've only identified 1 Silver Spear member. There could be more. After their last defeat, they might have increased their numbers. What if we're outnumbered? Fourth, the configuration of firepower. We don't know if they have other combat forces besides wizards, such as alchemy equipment or high-risk magical animals. Remember, you used alchemy equipment to trick them last time. They might be prepared now, and as smugglers, they could have tamed magical animals to assist them. Fifth, Anduin stretched out his last finger, we need to consider other interference factors. For example, if they have hostages or other intelligent creatures among their goods, rushing in could put those lives at risk. Anduin clapped his hands together, emphasizing each tactical point. Everyone around him, including Moody, was stunned. So, what do you suggest we do? Sneaking in to investigate could alert them. Moody, an experienced striker, voiced his concerns. Don't worry, I have a solution, Anduin replied with a confident smile. First, we need to determine our current position and the enemy's location and terrain. He began taking items out of his space ring, revealing folded papers. As he spread them out, everyone realized they were maps, including topographic maps with latitude, longitude, and contour lines of Ireland and other parts of the UK. Anduin found the map of Northern Ireland, and after studying it for a moment, pointed to a spot. We are here now. According to my tracking, the opponent's location is near Cape Ellis, 3 kilometers north of us. Let's first gather at this high ground, 1 kilometer away from the target. End of this chapter. Chapter 358, Echo Map. When we arrive at the designated location, I will carry out the corresponding investigation work and follow up tactical arrangements. Act now, Anduin ordered firmly. He then neatly folded the map in his hand, took out his broomstick, and flew into the sky to lead the way. Seeing this, the others around him instinctively took out their own broomsticks and followed Anduin. After flying for a while, they realized how naturally Anduin had taken command of the squad, and they didn't even question it. Even Moody followed without hesitation. After listening to Anduin's well-founded tactical explanation, they were quite shocked. Despite fighting on the front lines for many years, they hadn't realized there were so many strategic approaches. This young man, who had obviously not participated in any battles, explained the tactics so logically. While flying, the group of Aurors considered and absorbed the strategic elements Anduin had explained. They quickly approached the target location Anduin had mentioned. As they neared the ground, Anduin lowered his broomstick and landed. The others followed suit and gathered around him. Anduin didn't speak immediately after landing. Instead, he opened a shielding jammer and inserted it into the ground. Although we are the offensive side, our own safety should always be the top priority, especially in the wild, Anduin said, unable to resist giving a few words of caution. The surrounding Aurors felt he was being overly cautious, but they didn't object. After setting up the scene, Anduin took out the map again and used the communication tracker to detect their target. He was relieved to confirm that the opponent's position had not shifted. Next, Anduin pulled out a rod-shaped prop similar to the jammer. Unlike the disruptor, which had 8 protrusions, this metal rod had only one small antenna with a metal ball on top. Attached to it was a neatly cut piece of soft leather cloth, about 1 square meter in size. I haven't been idle for the past 6 months. This is the latest detection alchemy tool I have developed. I call it an echo-topographic map, Anduin said with a smile, showing everyone the metal rod. He then inserted it into the ground with a bang. Echo-topographic map? The others gathered around curiously. Next, I'll show you the power of this thing, Anduin said, a slight smile curling at the corner of his mouth. He began to input magic power into the metal rod. As the rod absorbed the magic, the small ball on top emitted a slight blue light. Those close by felt an invisible ripple sweep over them, while those farther away felt nothing. After activating the metal rod, Anduin focused on the soft leather cloth. He carefully spread it on the ground and tapped it flat with his wand. What happened next widened everyone's eyes. Layers of light spots appeared on the leather cloth, densely packed, gradually forming a 3-dimensional terrain. 15 figures appeared on it, which, upon closer inspection, were themselves. They realized the 3D graphics showed their current location. This echo map can sense and identify terrain within a radius of 3 kilometers. It can adjust the orientation, distance, and size at will, Anduin explained. As Anduin spoke, he tapped the map with his wand. The 3-dimensional topographical map shrank, and the figures of the Aurors became as small as ants. So that's it. With this piece of equipment, we can investigate the smuggling scene in advance, Moody said, clearly impressed. He eagerly urged Anduin to continue. Anduin knew this wasn't the time to show off, so he immediately zoomed in and swept north inch by inch along the direction he had perceived. When he pushed his perspective almost to the edge of the echo map, nearing the sea, he finally found the target. 2 figures stood on a relatively low seaside cliff. Anduin zoomed in further, focusing on them. The image formed by the echo charm scan wasn't particularly clear, but the basic outlines were discernible. Judging from the scanned 3D graphics, the 2 figures were of similar height, approximately 1.8 meters tall. Both wore faceless masks with the Silver Spear Club logo. These are 2 Silver Spear members. Why are there only 2 of them? Don't they usually gather a bunch of collaborators? Moody asked, recalling their last raid on a smuggling scene filled with wizards and crates of captured magical creatures. Don't worry, Anduin said, sensing something. Notice how these 2 are just standing quietly by the sea, as if they're waiting for someone. Oh? What do you mean? Moody asked, now observing more carefully. When was the last time they turned over magical beasts? Anduin asked the Aurors. The last time we saw them was around 10 p.m. It was an encounter. They were setting up camp with a big crate of viper tooth. We were searching along the route based on clues from previous smuggling activities. One of our teams happened to bump into them, and a fight ensued. We were all equipped with communication amulets and immediately came to support. We caught them off guard and took them down easily, Mevis recalled. It's now 9:30 a.m. It seems the smugglers haven't arrived yet, Anduin noted. He then turned to Moody for advice. Should we take them down now, or wait for the smugglers to arrive and catch them all at once? Of course, we should catch them all. Although the 2 Silver Spear members might be tricky, with the 2 of us here, blocking them shouldn't be a problem, Moody replied confidently. End of this chapter. Chapter 359, Human Trafficking. The Aurors around were taken aback when they heard Moody compare Anduin to himself. They had always sensed that the relationship between Moody and Anduin was unique, but it seemed Moody thought Anduin was even stronger than them. All right, Anduin nodded slightly. He had originally thought the same, but since this was a joint operation with the Ministry of Magic, it was better to consult the others. In that case, let's first check the surrounding terrain, and then deploy tactics after confirming the number of people and their configuration. Anduin then zoomed out on the tactical map to examine the surrounding terrain. The cliff where the 2 Silver Spears were standing was a 60-degree protrusion on the coast, surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, and the cliff was less than 5 meters above sea level. A large forest lay not far behind the cliff, making the area completely uninhabited. Surveying the terrain, Anduin quickly formulated a suitable siege strategy in his mind. However, before he could finalize his plan, a change occurred on the sea's surface in front of the 2 Silver Spears. One of the masked men standing on the edge of the cliff raised his wand, casting a spell. Unfortunately, Anduin's tactical map could only scan solid objects and couldn't recognize the spell being cast. Not long after the Silver Spear cast the spell, waves began to form on the sea, and 2 horse-headed beasts emerged from the water. These magical creatures were connected to a strangely shaped ship by a chain. The ship had no mast or canvas and was slender, resembling a giant football with a flattened top, revealing a large deck with a fence. That's a horse-shaped water monster. They must have been transporting goods underwater. No wonder we could only find traces of transshipment, but couldn't figure out how they transported across continents, Maywasi remarked, clearly impressed by the smuggler's ingenuity. Stop talking and look. Someone's getting off that ship, Moody interrupted, pointing to the 3D map. A large square hatch on the ship's upper deck opened, and several wizards in exotic costumes climbed out, casting spells on the hatch. A huge cage then rose from the hatch, and the 2 Silver Spears on the cliff cast a spell to take over the cage and transport it to land. Oh my god, why are there so many this time? One of the Aurors exclaimed. The smuggled goods this time were much more than in previous operations. The exotic wizards carried out cage after cage, almost without pause. The cages varied in size, from large square ones as big as huts to small birdcage-like ones. The size of these cages surpassed that of the diving boat, indicating the use of a traceless stretching curse. A total of 9 cages, 3 giant ones, 4 medium-sized, and 2 small ones. They've really outdone themselves this time, Anduin noted after the smugglers finished unloading. Can you roughly identify the magical beasts they have? Although Anduin's tactical map clearly showed the scanned objects, only some outlines were visible. Some cages were covered with cloth, making identification difficult. The animal in that bird cage. The creature in the cage looks very similar to a Wanyin bird. One of the larger cages must contain a griffon. The other 2 large cages beside it are covered, making it impossible to see what's inside. There should be a few rune horses in the medium-sized cage, Maywasi said confidently after carefully examining them. The animals in the other cages are all crowded together, so it's hard to tell them apart. But the one that stands out the most is the slender cage about 2 meters high. It looks like there's a person inside? Another person asked, pointing to a medium-sized cage with some uncertainty. The cage he referred to had a base of 1 meter square and a height of about 2 meters, resembling a large birdcage. Through the echo map, everyone could see a humanoid figure with limbs and clothes standing inside. "They're scum! They're actually trafficking people!" May W. Izzy trembled with anger, gritting her teeth. It's not surprising. Human wizards or slaves of intelligent creatures are not uncommon in the magical world of America. Moody snorted coldly, clearly familiar with the scene. "Well, they've arrived. Let's go now," May Weissy said, pulling out her wand excitedly, eager to act. "Don't rush," Anduin said, shaking his head. "These Aurors have good fighting spirit, but their tactics are too simple and straightforward. Don't just look at the cargo they're transporting. Count their current numbers." Anduin tapped the map, and the screen immediately zoomed in. "This is..." All the Aurors leaned in to count after hearing his words, then couldn't help but swallow nervously. There are actually 24 people, and they brought dogs? Including those 2 silver spears, there are 26 people. That means there are 24 regular wizards and 2 silver spears, plus 3 hounds. Charging in with just 15 of us, are you sure we have a chance of winning? Anduin asked, tilting his head. Then, what should we do now? Should we call for support? An Auror asked, clearly frightened by the number of enemies. Waiting is not an option, Anduin replied, shaking his head. Our goal is to catch them all, especially those 2 silver spears. What if they run away while we're waiting for reinforcements? They are extremely destructive and dangerous. Anduin, do you have any strategies to handle this situation, especially to minimize casualties? Moody asked, noticing Anduin's calm demeanor. 15 versus 26. The difference in numbers is not more than double. According to your previous information, these foreign wizards are just slightly better than ordinary adult wizards. This battle is not difficult, Anduin said, sweeping his gaze over everyone and sneering. End of this chapter. Chapter 360. Group Attack. Now, we need to assess the strengths and weaknesses of both our side and the enemy, Anduin began, pausing for a moment before continuing. First of all, we have the advantage of being in the dark and possessing crucial information. Secondly, we have standard alchemy equipment, which gives us a firepower advantage. However, the enemy has a significant number of people, and we don't know their exact strength. We also don't know if they have alchemy equipment. Additionally, they have a guard dog, which was clearly spooked by your last siege. They might be prepared with jammers this time. So, to deal with the enemy effectively, we must leverage our advantages and catch them by surprise, Anduin said, turning to look at everyone. How many of you can proficiently use the disillusionment charm? Most of the Aurors raised their hands in response to Anduin's question. Very good. The enemy is engaged in human trafficking this time, so their resistance will be fierce. They might use the unforgivable curses. How many of you can skillfully counter the killing curse and other dark magic? Anduin continued. At this point, the Aurors exchanged uneasy glances. They hadn't considered this possibility, but Anduin's words made sense. Eventually, only 4 senior Aurors, including May Weissy, raised their hands. Well, 4 people? That will have to suffice. Anduin nodded. Next, we will make tactical arrangements. First, I will teach you a relatively simple tactical formation, the 3-3 system. With these 4 senior Aurors as leaders, we will divide into 3 groups of 3 and 1 group of 4. Moody and I will form a separate group. Each group will have 1 member proficient in dealing with dark magic as the captain. The group members will stand in a triangle formation, with the captain in the center. During the battle, the captain will focus on defense, while the others handle offense. If you encounter encirclement or poor visibility, move closer to the captain's position and tighten the defense. Your targets are the 24 foreign smugglers. Moody and I will handle the 2 silver spears. Next, the 4 captains and I will set up 2 types of jammers. Everyone will cast the disillusionment charm on themselves and move to tactical positions in a fan-shaped formation at these points, Anduin said, marking 4 locations on the topographic map with his wand. Each point had a wide view and provided cover. As for the hounds, don't worry. I have a potion that can eliminate our scent. Everyone will apply a little later. Once at the target location, wait for my signal. As soon as the signal appears, focus on the smugglers closest to you. Use all your attack talismans at that moment. Moody, you and I will deal with the 2 silver spears, Anduin said, glancing at Moody. No problem. I've been looking forward to confronting these guys. I've heard they have some unique spells. This is the perfect opportunity to see them in action, Moody replied with a cold smile, his face looking quite menacing. Remember, your attacks must be synchronized and swift. Your spells must be decisive. Try to reduce the enemy's numbers by at least 5 in the first wave. After the initial raid, the enemy will be in chaos. Seize this opportunity to launch further attacks. Once they regroup and the battle turns into a tug-of-war, captains, focus on defense. Our priority is to ensure our own safety, Anduin instructed, looking at the 4 senior aurors. No problem, but what about the magical creatures being transported? What if they take the people in the cages as hostages or release the creatures? One of the aurors asked. Anduin paused, considering the question. If they take hostages, we will need to adjust our strategy on the fly. Our primary goal is to neutralize the smugglers quickly. If they release the creatures, we will have to deal with them as they come. Stay alert and be ready for anything. The aurors nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They prepared themselves for the upcoming confrontation, knowing that their success depended on their coordination and quick thinking. Are the magical animals out to create chaos? Meiwei recalled Anduin's mention of interference items in the strategic elements. She couldn't help frowning as she asked. Very good. It seems you still remember what I said before. Anduin nodded in satisfaction. This is the special mission I want to arrange. These smugglers will definitely gather these cages later for easier transportation. A team will need to go through and seize these cages first, establishing a line of defense centered around them. After finishing, Anduin glanced at Meiwei. How about it? Can you take on this task? I can arrange 1 more person for you. A 4-person team should be sufficient to guard these goods. Leave it to me. Meiwei's mouth curled up slightly, a strong desire to fight igniting in her eyes. This arrangement is no problem. Moody nodded in approval and then looked at everyone with a solemn expression. Attention! You must not show mercy to these villains. They may provoke you or even kneel down and beg for mercy. But remember, only an immobile enemy is a good enemy. Anduin also nodded in agreement and then conveniently put away the tactical map on the ground. Everyone, stand together. I will cast a protection spell on you. Later, I will cast some range spells. Without my protection spell, you might get accidentally injured. Remember, hearing thunder is the signal to attack. Everyone watched as Anduin cast a static pulse spell on them. The spell looked fancy, and many were taken aback. Meiwei frowned slightly after seeing the lightning magic used by Anduin. She recalled that a wizard skilled in lightning magic had appeared in Scamander's house. This made her look at Anduin more closely, slightly doubting his identity. However, she knew now was not the time to pursue these matters. After everyone was ready, they set up the shielding jammer from a distance and quickly moved towards the sea. At this time, on the coast, the smugglers were neatly sorting out the goods that had been transported. They spread out a very large flying carpet and then piled the large iron cages on it, like building blocks, using a spell to manipulate the ropes that held the cages together. While the smugglers were busy, 2 wizards with faceless masks stood beside them, watching quietly. Thunderbird, why hasn't there been any news about the infiltration team of the Sphinx? Aren't they supposed to follow your command after arriving in England? A masked man glanced at the Thunderbird beside him, puzzled. Presumptuous. Who do you think you are talking to? Thunderbird responded with a domineering attitude. Birdsnake, you are just a short spear. Pay attention to your identity. This is not a question you should ask. End of this chapter.